Welcome to the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast, where we talk about fitness, health, and anything to help you become the most optimal human beings. Let's dive into it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. Jerred Moon here with Joe Courtney. What's up, Joe?
How you go, man?
Pretty good. We're going to get into one of my favorite topics today.
Podcasts are getting smaller.
Oh, fewer people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where is everybody?
Yeah.
I didn't see him by the water
Transition
cooler
times.
this morning.
Yeah. Everyone's on summer vacation.
I know, right? Time off. So anyway, one of my favorite topics today is we're really talking about the self-determination theory when we get into the study in a little bit. And that's a big part of our EO3 coaching program. And so I'm really glad that there's been this huge meta-analysis on it. So we're going to cover that today. And it's all about, kind of building up your intrinsic motivation, how to be motivated or get motivated, if you will, kind of hack your own psychology to get yourself to stick with things. And it's one of my favorite topics from a coaching standpoint. But before we get into that, man, first thing I want people to know, this is week one. Like today, we're starting week one of a new cycle. So if you are new around here at Garage Gym Athlete, go to garagegymathlete.com and you can sign up for a 14-day free trial. And so we would love to have you on here. This is right at the beginning of the new cycle. So if you want to start, now would be the time. It's just a great time. You can start anytime, and a lot of people do. But if you want to start fresh at the beginning of a new cycle on one of our tracks, go to garagegymathlete.com, sign up for that free trial, and try out the programming. You got two free weeks just to test it out, see if you like it. And if you don't have to continue. If you do, hey, we'd love to have you for the full cycle and longer. But how are things with you, Joe? How's life?
Not great, Bob.
Yeah,
I went from
you'll hear his grunts and sighs.
Like a week. Yeah, I went from being sick for like a week, which it was like it was only like bad for a couple of days, and I just had a sore throat, which still made it like hard to breathe and do things. And then I had a few days of goodness, and then I was starting to get back into it, and then I tweaked my back yesterday. So now I have a hurt back, and it's not feeling good. And I've always known that I've had really tight hips, and this is kind of a similar problem that I had a long time ago when I went to PT for so long. And like I kind of know how to fix it a little bit. It's just going to take time. Usually, it hasn't acted up since because usually I have some early indicators, and that's like having really tight quads. Usually, my quads are just so freaking tight that when I stand up, I can feel how tight they are. And then my hip flexors feel tight, but I haven't felt any tightness at all with these, working out in a couple of weeks. And I think because of that, I hadn't been doing my stretching or any sort of mobility, which I was before for the longest time. I was doing couch stretches, almost daily because it's just how good it is. So I was warming up, and just during warm up sets, I felt things get tight, and then I did another rep and felt things get even tighter. So I racked it. I did just unilateral work, body weight unilateral work after that, just because I needed to get something in, and I still felt okay. But then it just, after I sat down for like an hour and a half, and because of sitting down, my hip flexors tightened even more, and my back was just like not good at all. So I've been stretching my hip flexors a lot, and then some of my hips just a little bit here and there. It hasn't even been 24 hours since, but it's good that once I start stretching my hips and my hip flexors, that it does relieve it a lot. Like the very first time I did it yesterday, I was actually able to stand up straight, whereas right before that, I couldn't. So yeah, just tight hips. Don't lax on your mobility if you know you need to stretch some, because it might be too
what's
late
the
by
lesson
time you
here
realize it.
for everybody?
Yeah, yeah, it is. I need to keep up with my hip mobility. I still do some before I squat. Like I'll open up my hip some, and I also make sure to do a some sort of glute activation. So usually it's like a side lunge, or at PT they call them knee machines. Either way, I make sure to fire up my glutes first, singly, and then, but I still need to keep my hips mobility going, my quads and my hip flexors. So
And
yeah, a
that's
little bit of a lesson.
that's just a good point for everyone listening, because the exact same thing happened to me in BCT when I hurt my lower back. Is I had this amazing like very well balanced program before BCT. I was following hard to kill track. I would do daily mobility. I mean, probably five or more days a week. I would do like ROM WOD every single morning, and if not like a structured ROM WOD, just some stretches, hip flexors, couch stretches, things that you're talking about. And I was just doing that, and I had been doing that for years. But then when BCT came along, the training sessions were getting a little bit longer, and so I was trying to fit everything in. And so the first thing to go for me was the mobility, the stretching, and all of those kind of things. And it wasn't long into that programming once I stopped doing those things that I got injured, and it was a lower back injury, and I'm pretty much recovered from that now. But I just think, there are some people who like argue that people you don't need to stretch and it doesn't actually help that much, and I get really frustrated with those people because I don't feel like they've ever probably like exercised or seriously trained in their entire life. They just like are trying to manipulate studies to say it's not that beneficial or whatever, but it's just amazing the anecdotal experience we have as coaches and as athletes that if we continue to stretch or continue to have our athletes stretch, they get injured less. It's just a weird thing, so anyone thinking or you hear you don't need to stretch, um I really would run away from that information. I think that it's bad. So, and a big thing that Joe hit on, hip flexors. Like loosen up your hip flexors to relieve lower back tension and pain. Sometimes people just try to attack the area where it hurts, and a lot of times it might be another area that's actually causing the pain. You don't always have to go figure that out yourself. You can get a physical therapist, and they can help you figure that out. But you'd be surprised on like how many muscles really connect to the lower back. And how many different ways you could stretch that isn't stretching your lower back at all, but can provide relief in the lower back area.
Yeah, so much of that, like the opposite side of it. And just for a little more on the hips, how I understand it, at least for mine, is that my hips will tilt forward, and it tilts forward because my hip flexors and my quads are tight, and because it's tilting forward because it's tight on the front, it puts pressure on the back. So you need to relieve the front to loosen it so that it tilts backward the right way. And then I've had shoulder issues too, where I've had pinching in the back of my shoulder where my lat and my delt kind of meet. But one of the things that when I went to PT, what they were doing was working on my pec, because my pec might, because like if I'm internally rotated or slash forward a little bit, your pec gets really tight, which pulls the shoulder forward, which puts us in a bad position, which causes a pinching in the back. So yeah, it's just crazy how kind of the body works and how you can relieve certain things. And um, it's another reason why to go to PT, because the PT just can be great. It's you have the professional doing it, but also you can learn a lot of these things so that in the future you can be more autonomous, and that can be a good segue to you still have your updates
Yeah, I guess if
almost.
you don't care about me, it's a great segue to go straight into the study.
Well, now you just have to match that somehow.
I actually don't have a lot to say. I think I don't want to spend any more time on the updates. I do want to get into the study. I think the only new thing in my world, it's getting crazy hot in Texas, like unseasonably hot for June. To be honest, like we had a 105, 106 day the other day where the feels like was up to 120. Humidity was high, and those are normally reserved for like a few days, late August, early September, something like that. And then that's like right when like summer's nearing its end. For that to happen in June, that's bad news. That's either we're in for it this season, or maybe it'll go back down. But it's been made for some good training sessions in the garage. And then let's see, I got a new bike seat for the concept too, because I haven't been on the bike like at all because of my lower back issues that I've had. But I feel like the new bike seat might be okay. I've done at least 3 training sessions over the last week on the new bike seat with no lower back pain. I'm feeling pretty good. So pretty
Like
excited about.
off-brand
Yeah, I just
non-concept
bought it
seat,
on
just kind
Amazon,
of
like
fit.
some,
Okay.
and it's got like it's a bigger seat. It's not like some like aerodynamic, like made of hard plastic, like the seats that
Yeah.
these bikes come with typically, just to provide a little bit more support. So yeah, that's it. New bike seat. I'm excited. Training's getting back to normal, but we can get into the study. So the study this week is autonomy, support in sport and exercise settings, a systematic review and meta-analysis. So this is it's a hard study to break down. Okay, so
I had
it
to
is,
recall some past psychology courses I took in college 10 years ago, kind of thing.
yeah, and typically when we do a systematic review or meta-analysis, they are typically a little bit more challenging. And the whole point of us even going over studies is not just to bring science to people. It's more like the coach's review of the information, because we like the science, but sometimes science doesn't boil down to practicality. And that's one of our biggest things: is how do we use this information? Is it useful? Can our athletes use it? Can we use it as coaches? Because we are not scientists, and we're not trying to be. We're not trying to rip these studies apart like we have PhDs and we're like, oh, well, they should have done X, Y, and Z. Like, who are we to say that? But oftentimes, and we talk about a lot, they don't. It doesn't seem that they involved any sort of practical, real world athlete or coach perspective on these things, and that's the real reason we talk about studies in general. Now, with these bigger ones, like a study of studies, we can't pull out exactly every little detail of like who was in the study and all those things, but the main overview of this study, the primary purpose was to provide a basic overview of the self-determination theory research in literature, providing broad descriptive evidence of various correlates and potential consequences of coach autonomy support, as well as their strength of association with important athlete outcomes. So all they were really looking at was if there is some sort of self determination theory practice implemented in a coaching program, does it help with athlete outcomes? Like, do they actually stick to programs more? Are their performance metrics actually better? And I'm just going to jump straight to the cut to the chase. Yes, it does. It's when a coach focuses on things outside of sets and reps and nutrition, and they do have a lot of focus on the psychological aspects of the human being they're working with, they do get greater outcomes for their athletes. And that should be like just plainly obvious for anyone. It's like the difference of AI programming for you in the future or having a coach like walk you through that. And I think that's why coaches will always be relevant with AI getting smarter and all these things. Like programming can be formulaic. We actually have a rather formulaic version of programming, which I'm sure we could, hire a high end like computer programmer to automate a lot of things for us, right? But there's always going to be that missing piece of the coach perspective and the coach support. And, that's a big reason we started the Garage Gym Athlete podcast in the first place. Was that was the biggest missing piece to like an online community of fitness and training, was us being able to talk and communicate with athletes. Now, we don't get the direct feedback while we're recording these from the athletes, but we get the feedback in other areas from athletes. And we're able to address concerns, talk to people about things. And I think it's a really important part of coaching. So we could talk about this study a little bit more. I'd love to get your thoughts, Joe, on the study. But also today, for our topic, we really just are going to kind of focus on the same thing. So a lot of talk about self-determination theory today, and also just, I don't know, the soft side of coaching that isn't programming, isn't macros and all that. So what do you think of the study?
Yeah, I liked it. I like that it took this route to I mean it yes, it is on motivation, but it's on much more than motivation, and just how coaches should go about treating their athletes, and which part of it is motivation, but also setting them up for success. And I think one of the biggest flaws in what you find with personal coaching, especially like in person and things, and well, I guess even online. I don't even know how some other places do one-on-one online coaching, but I think coaches, it biggest flaw isn't that they're not qualified. It is the sales aspect of it. It is that they want to keep you on the hook and around so that you're a consistent client with theirs, which to some degree makes some sense. But if you're continuing to provide value, then people will stick around. And providing the most value is what this study kind of looked at: is how to provide the best kind of motivation, intrinsically versus whatever extrinsic motivation, external motivation that they are trying to provide, and educating people to that they can thrive in this as well. So, and I pulled out a little couple of quotes from the thing, but one of them was, a coach's job is to create and maintain a program that addresses the needs of the client, but also to cultivate an environment that enables the client to thrive. So you need to give the client what they need, what they want out of the program, but also you need to make sure that they can thrive within that and possibly even outside of it. So it's cool to look at that they examined it this way to see that the clients or the athletes did the best when they were found the intrinsic motivation, but also that they were taught how to do things, and to become more autonomous as possible so that they didn't necessarily rely on the coach as much. And I think it makes sense because even when I've had certain experiences, like the more I learn about something, the more I um the more into it I am, the more I want to go back and learn more. And then months down the road I might be like, okay, cool, I've learned enough that I can kind of take it all on my own. But there's still going to be stuff that, like, I'm still not a specialist on it. I have I have a good understanding on it so that I can still help myself, or even like help others, and like spread the good word of whatever it is. But specialists are still there, that you're still going to come back and kind of need them. Speaking from a coaching standpoint, that people are still going to come back and have whatever you have, or whatever service you have, if you provide enough um, quality to them, because you still taught them, you've still given them a good experience, and maybe they still want to learn more. And we have athletes all the time that they'll do our programming for a long time, and then they might stop our programming and service and be like, hey, I think I kind of want to try some of this programming on my own. I kind of have this idea and that, and then they'll do that and it's fine. And then maybe months later they'll come back and say, it went all great, but I found that I still wasn't doing this. I was still lacking this kind of thing. So yeah, study. I liked it a lot. It was a cool look at how, not just the different types of motivation, but making athletes autonomous is good for both the coaches and the athletes.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one of our like slogans, like building autonomous athletes. We use that a lot more on the EO3 coaching side of things when coaches go through our coaching course. But that's ultimately what you want. And it can be, for us, to the detriment of the business, right? Like if we truly build an autonomous athlete in every regard, they wouldn't need us, right? They just, we would be unnecessary, so they would no longer need to pay for our services. But we want people to want our services, not need our services. And I always go back to the oil change analogy. Is and I can change my own oil, and I have a lot in the past, but I don't do that anymore because it's more advantageous to my time to just pay the fee to have someone do my oil change with the rest of the diagnostics on my truck, right? Like it's easier. So I have the ability, but I don't do it. I let someone else do it because I think it's better to have a professional do it faster than I can do it. So anyway, that's the same thing with like our programming and how I want athletes to view it is like, yeah, I can do this. I could program, I could do all these things, but ultimately I don't want to. I want someone else to do it because I have other things to focus on, like my job, my family, life, like all these other things. And so building the autonomous athlete really comes from a lot of um, ways. And maybe we'll get more into that when we get to the topic. But specific to the study, I just thought it was really cool that there's this giant systematic review and meta-analysis on the self-determination theory. Because I mean, honestly, we started pulling studies from the self-determination theory for the EO3 coaching course. I don't even know, like 8 years ago, something like that. It's been a long time. It was a lot of how the EO3 coaching course was put together. So I think that it's cool because all this is really doing, it's not a guide necessarily on how to utilize self-determination theory in your coaching, but it's more proof and evidence that we were on the right track and that coaches absolutely should be trying to make more autonomous athletes. And athletes listening, you guys should be focusing more on increasing your intrinsic motivation. And then this just kind of foot stomps that. And real quick, if anyone is unfamiliar with intrinsic versus extrinsic, so extrinsic goal is what almost everyone in the fitness industry pushes and sells. So extrinsic is six pack abs. Extrinsic is, you know, the way you're going to look. It's going to be weight on the scale. It could even be weight on the bar or mile time. Um, Intrinsic, it just means you have a bigger reason internally, like a big why for doing something. And that can be a lot of different things. And sometimes you can have an intrinsic motivator that links to extrinsic. Um, like it's not necessarily bad to say that you want to lose 10 pounds as your goal. Like, I want to lose 10 pounds. If that's all your goal is, and there's really, maybe it's just a vanity, you want to be 10 pounds lighter, that kind of motivator doesn't get you through tough times. But if you're like, I need to lose 10 pounds to improve my health, to live longer, potentially live longer for my children, now we have a huge intrinsic motivator that happens to connect to an extrinsic motivator. And you really need to get away from all of the extrinsic motivators. It's another reason why we have athletes go through our why exercise of just answering multiple levels of why you want something to eventually uncover why you might want to do what you're doing. And if you don't really have a big why, you might want to answer that. But if you don't have a big why and you're super consistent, I guess it doesn't really matter. You probably have some sort of why that you're unaware of, but you're sticking to things anyway. So that's what we want for athletes. It's what coaches should be helping their athletes get toward. And overall, in all instances, if athletes have autonomous motivation, intrinsic motivation, integrated regulation, like all these different things, controlled motivation, like they went over so many things. If athletes have that kind of put into their program by their coach, they have better performance outcomes, better athletic outcomes, and overall goal achievement. So I think that it's really cool. It's an awesome study. If you do like to nerd out on this stuff, definitely jump into this study and you can read more about it. But I want to spend a little bit more time on the topic of just talking about, you know, this idea of intrinsic motivation, how we do it, how we've kind of coached it, pull some stuff from our, the EO3 coaching program that we have, and talk about those things a little bit more, and getting athletes to, go down this journey of being motivated, because it's the biggest part of what athletes need. And I'm sure you've heard that saying where it's like, you can't rely on motivation. You just need discipline. And I do agree with that. Like some days you're just not going to feel like it and you can't be like, well, I'm going to wait till I'm motivated or whatever and then I'll do it. You just have to be disciplined and like do it either way. But that doesn't mean motivation is something that you should not pay attention to at all. Because there should only be so much of pushing yourself to do something that you hate. Because I exercise on a daily basis and I almost never hate it. Like ever. Like I'm never like, damn it, I have to go train. I never feel that way because I have a different level of motivation. I understand my why behind what I'm doing. And so that whole idea of pushing yourself to do things you hate is cool and all. It sounds like it makes you really mentally tough and everything. But that's not where you want to be in every of your area of your life forever, because that just doesn't sound like a fun life. You want to push yourself, and rely on discipline over motivation when necessary, but ultimately you want to make those things that you don't want to do things that you want to do. So, and you have to do that by changing your perception, finding out what your motivation is. Motivation isn't just an emotion; it's a reason, it's a reasoning. So we'll get into that a little bit more. Joe, what are your thoughts on this topic? I'll let you dive off wherever you want. I have a lot of different places we could go, but in general, what are your thoughts?
On intrinsic motivation,
Yeah.
I think it's definitely it helps in the long term approach of things. It's really easy to make excuses when you have such a external sort of extrinsic motivation, because it's easier to justify things. That's how that's kind of how cheat days are born. People that are trying to lose weight or get shredded, like, oh well, I was good for 5 or 6 days, but now I have my cheat day and it's fine. I'll be fine. I'll just get right back into it because like that sort of justification and excuses is like, okay, that's how that's such a short-sighted thing, because if one little thing can just be justified, and then and I'm not saying you can't have those moments, but having that short, like, seeing how short-sighted that is, and if it's that easy to just blow off, then maybe it's not quite deep of enough of a reason. And now having the bigger intrinsic motivation, you can still have those moments, but it's about a much bigger picture. To you're still, one day isn't going to derail what the bigger picture is. um but you're also more likely to not go off the deep end or do anything crazy, because it's like, okay, well, I'm still working toward this much bigger thing, so maybe I shouldn't just go off the rails today on this cheat day, or just completely skip all these training sessions, because I have it's going to be harder for me to make up time because I have this bigger goal in mind. So I think, just from a practical standpoint of looking at things from a um more recent time period to long term, short term versus long term, is another way to, at least that I kind of like to think about it. That um I'm not training for something that I want in a couple of weeks. I'm training for something that I want in months or years.
Yeah. And I want to dive into a little bit more how athletes can practically use this. It's like, okay, what if I don't have this giant intrinsic motivator? So just for me, mine is a lot about my overall health and being around for my family for a very long time. So that easily helps me get into this long term mindset. I'm not in a rush. I don't have anything that has to happen, but I do know I need to be incredibly consistent. It also affects like what kind of training I do, high intensity versus low intensity, like how many times I train different energy systems, because the only real goal is being a useful human being, strong human being while I'm here, and also being around as long as possible. I want when my kids get older, you know, even much older, 20s, 30s, to be able to still do cool things with them and be fit enough to do it. So, what does that also mean? It means I can't run my body into the ground right now, which is, I think I was on that path for a while and I've fixed it. But that's the big reason why I do things. Now, that's not going to be true for everybody, and I understand that. And so, if that's not your why, how could we help you discover one? And if you look at the self determination theory, and a great place to go for this is just selfdeterminationtheory.org. They have a lot of great, like, if you want to read all sorts of research papers and articles, go to that website and it's pretty awesome. But two things that we landed on that are really helpful, especially when it comes to exercise specific, because self determination theory is not just about exercise. The self determination theory is how do we get people to do things that they don't want to do, and it goes back to this fact that there's this belief or theory that humans have this desire, this innate desire to want to improve, like that it's in all human beings. That's why it's a theory, right? Because you can't say that that's a universal truth. It's a fact. I believe it. I believe every human being out there wants to be a better version of themselves in some capacity, and they want to work towards that. Not everyone's had the correct circumstances to be able to do that, but I do believe in that theory. But when you're looking at physical exercise, the two things that come up are enjoyment and competence. So enjoyment and competence are two things that you should start to look for when you're talking about an intrinsic motivator. And so enjoyment is pretty simple. Enjoyment means you just enjoy to do it. Going back to what I was saying earlier, you should not be forcing yourself to do something you hate in the physical fitness world every single day of the week. There's going to be some of that. There's going to be like, man, like we got zone 2 this week. I hate running that slow. I was like, do it. It's like eating your vegetables. It's good for you. Do it. But if you hate training with a barbell, can't stand it, don't want to do it, and every time it's like you just want to like pull your hair out when you're done. You'd rather be on a bike, or you'd rather, use a kettlebell or a sandbag because you hate the barbell. Don't use the barbell. It's that simple. There's no magic in forcing yourself to do that. If you don't enjoy it, don't do it. So long as that has a replacement, right? So long as you're doing something else in its place. Like we do concurrent training. We honestly believe concurrent training is the best form of training for a human being. But if you hate it and you want to be all strength or you want to be all endurance, like most people are, um, there's a lot more strength camps and endurance camps than there are concurrent training camps um, in this world. So that's fine too, if that's your enjoyment. But you have to do what you enjoy. So focus on that more than anything else. Next would be competence. And just to put this in an easy way to understand it, it's about learning and something that you can get better at. So just start thinking about those things. I feel like anytime I've gotten into I've been into fitness forever, but there's been like so many like little things within fitness that I have to go like learn and get better at. I enjoy that process. Like when I got into cycling, a few years ago, I had to learn how to do it, how not to burn out. I had to learn the gear and the tech and how to pace myself. And there was a lot of learning. And that's going to be true in almost anything if you actually want to get better at it. And that's the big thing is this intentional practice. You don't want to just get on a bike and ride it the same way every time, or go out and run and just always run how you run every single time. Like actually dive into how could I be a better runner? What's a better stride? What should I be doing with my arms? How should I be breathing? Same with cycling, same with lifting a barbell, same with lifting a kettlebell. In all these areas, you can spend a lot of time getting better at something. Or, I'm trying to think if there are other this is built into like Peloton and things now, like leveling up on scores and things like that. Those things don't work for me. But if that's something that you can get better at when your fitness is actually gamified, look at that. Maybe that's something that you could dive into for more competence. But ultimately, if there's an education base to your training, and you are learning and you're getting better, and you want to continue to learn and you continue on to get better, you can see improvement as you go through the process, then you're going to have that competence piece. So you have enjoyment and competence. If you can do those two things, as opposed to having some big, gigantic why, like I was talking about earlier, if you can just do those two things, you'll stick with fitness and programs a lot longer than most anyone else, if not indefinitely. Now, the other piece to this, and I kind of want to get your take on it, Joe, was that's kind of like a little bit more the athlete side. How do you think a coach should like lead people down this path? If you have any ideas of like, if we want to make an athlete a little bit more autonomous, or we want to get them, working more towards enjoyment and competence, or anything, just being more intrinsically motivated, like what could we do as coaches to better help them do that? Do you have any ideas?
One of them could be actual intent, like expressing the intent of certain things that you're doing. Like we try to do this in some regard, especially if the people need like scaling options. And people see, they'll see a couple of exercises like, okay, we're just lifting things today, and then we're just doing these intervals, so I'm just going to go and do it. But like knowing why or what the intent behind those specific things are might be eye opening as to um bigger picture, or like how their program, how this will specifically shape what we're doing. We're not just like throwing things on the wall and say, hey, we just want you to lift some stuff today, so we're just go lift some stuff. But it's actually like, oh well, we're actually doing this movement because we want you to work on power. We want you to be more powerful, and that's what you're working on here. So I don't really care what weight you're doing. I just want you to be explosive and powerful. And then like those little pieces, those little nuggets of, oh, okay, that's why I don't need to worry about this specific movement necessarily or the weight on it. I just need to focus on this portion because that's all that the real intent is. And so knowing somewhat of intent of what you're doing is a big I think is a big moment, and that's why the athlete briefs that we have are usually pretty important to view. If you've For our programming, we have a daily athlete brief. No matter what track you're on, we record a video explaining the workout. And if there's something specifically intent wise that we want you to hit, then we'll explain it there. And just knowing that intent and what sort of stimulus we're going for will help, because in the long run you'll probably even get to the point where you know what the intent is, and you can probably even replicate it, or if you need to add something in the future or something like that, making up a workout on your own for fun on the weekend, then you can kind of start to take these pieces.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it on the head right there. Um, the education piece for I think all coaches should do that is helping an athlete understand a little bit more of the why behind what they are doing, because they and this might be true like whether you're a coach listening to this or an athlete listening to this. This is just another tactic to use either to get your athletes to stick to programs better, or athlete a kind of like a psychological trick you could play on yourself to get a little bit more bought into a program. It's also what we teach in the coaching course is getting athletes bought into your program. So explaining why you're doing what you're doing, even in like smaller capacities. You don't need to sit down and have like a 30-minute presentation over it. You just like small little things about why you're working on what you're working on, how you're doing it, and how this connects to their overall goal, I think is really important. And this education piece will get people um, more educated, will probably help them enjoy it more, and they'll have more competence in the process. How do we do that? Joe's already mentioned it. This podcast is a major way that we do it. We talk about our programming all the time. And, we want our athletes to know, not from an arrogant sense, like we think we're the best and we just say that over and over again. We want our athletes to know why we think that and why we think concurrent training is the best, and not just mashing two programs together, concurrent training, trying to create the most well balanced program possible. So we do that a lot in this podcast because this is an online program, right? And this is the best place we can do it. Every single cycle before it kicks off, we have a new cycle webinar that just published recently. And we explain a little bit more about what the overall goal for a training cycle is. And this is to educate athletes so, one, they can make an informed decision on which track they want to go on, but also it gets athletes a little bit more bought in when we're not just like, yeah, you're on the hard to kill track, like deal with it. Like it's like, here's what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. Here's what was written. Here's some samples, and try to educate athletes. I think I've spent not the most recent, but the previous two webinars really just diving deeper into our methodology and our approach and how we program. And those are published on YouTube if you guys want to see those, or even past episodes. But I've gone pretty deep on, just educating athletes on what we do and how we do it. And I think that's another big one. So podcast, the webinars, and then also the athlete briefs is where I think that probably takes us over the top, is just that daily brief of what we're doing. Most of the time, the brief is just like the nuts and bolts of what's happening today. But sometimes it's also there as like a preemptive, you're going to do this wrong if you don't listen, and here's why we're doing it. Like that's what the athlete brief intent is, to give a little bit of just not how to execute it, but a little bit of intention behind it if we feel like the athlete's not going to understand. Now, if it's something really simple, there's not as much of that intent and explanation because it might just be that simple. But if it is something that needs the explanation, we normally go out of our way to do that. So that's how we're doing it here. If you've ever wondered, like, oh, well, how are you guys putting this self-determination theory into practice that you say you have been doing for like almost a decade? Well, that's how we've been doing it, through educational content, communication with athletes, and making sure everybody knows what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we're doing it. So yeah, I think that's another tip for coaches and athletes alike. You got anything else, Joe?
Nope, not really. If you're on the program, you're probably listening to the podcast, but if you know anybody else that is, I don't even care if they're doing our programming or not, but just wants to learn more, or be more autonomous, this podcast is probably the best way to start, because we talk about things that are all in fitness all around. I mean, like this, about motivation, or about it, just how programming anything is. And we've got, this is episode 151, so over 2 years of studies, and we're going to keep going. So share it with a friend if they need some more knowledge.
Yeah. If they need to learn how to stick to things, share this podcast episode. Second thing, shameless plug, right here, Killing Comfort, book I wrote. You can get you can go to killingcomfort.com. You can get the audiobook. You can get it on Amazon, digital, shipped to your house, whatever you want. But that was a big reason I wrote that book. And it's not just about fitness. It's actually very little about fitness. And has everything to do with just sticking to things. And that's all I really want people to get out of Killing Comfort is if you can read that book and implement how to stick to something. I don't care how small it is. Taking your daily multivitamin. And that's you are learning how to become a person who sticks to things. And the dividends that will pay in your life are like 1,000-fold. And I always give this example. For me, it was fitness. I think fitness taught me basically everything I've needed to know about life. And that might sound like a big statement, but it taught me how to manipulate conversations in my head when they weren't going well. It taught me consistency and sticking to things. And I worked on that for so long, I was able to branch it out into all these other areas of my life to where I can be consistent in doing something in a relationship with my wife, or I can be consistent and push myself in doing something in business or with my personal finances. It's given me a lot of not discipline, but also the ability to have that consistency, push myself when things are uncomfortable, wait for the long-term reward instead of, the immediate gratification. So for me, fitness has taught me a lot. And I think that it's a great place for a lot of people to start, but it doesn't have to be. You can learn this in a lot of different areas. But yeah, that's basically it for this one. Share this podcast episode specifically with a friend if you feel like they should learn how to stick to things a little bit better, or if they need that help. Joe, we can jump to the Meet Yourself Saturday if you'd like.
And if you haven't been tuning into the podcast on YouTube, it's getting fancy over here with these little video breaks and
I don't even know
everything.
how Joe's doing what he's doing right now. It's impressive stuff.
Magic. All right, so the Meet Yourself Saturday for this week is walk the plank. We both had to look this one up because it's one of the
Been
oldest
so
ones,
long.
and yeah. So it's a Zercher walk with a barbell. So Zercher walk is you kind of bear hugging a barbell in front of you. 10 rounds for max distance each round. And the weight can be 50 to 60% of your body weight, but really you should go with whatever feels best for you to execute the 10 rounds for max distance. You can actually carry it for a little bit. Distance will probably go down over time. It should go down for just how weighted carries go, but just making sure you are staying tight in your core and your back is not like rounding a ton while doing these. So stay safe. But 10 rounds for max distance each round. Rest between rounds is 2 minutes, and then rest is in the plank position. Ouch. Lots of core. So weighted carry for 10
Ouch.
rounds, and your 2 minutes of rest is in the plank position. My first question to you is, what if you can't plank for 2 minutes? Are you just breaking it up and
Why
completing?
can't you plank for 2 minutes?
Because I suck at planks. It is like I'm like legitimately, I might be able to do one set of plank in 2 minutes. This is why Plank You Tyler was just a knife right in the gut to me, because it's just I just cannot plank.
I think it would be rest is, and I should probably now go change that. Rest is 2 minutes accumulated in the plank.
Yeah.
There you go. So if you need to rest outside of it, that'd be fine. But the goal is unbroken plank. Any tips?
Well, um, no. it like the main one was the weight on the Zercher walk. Make sure you're not going too heavy because you still need to walk with it, and then it's still part of your core. So, and like as you're doing your planks I mean, you're doing a minimum of 20 minutes in the plank. Your core is just going to break down even more. So stay safe and conservative on the weight for the Zercher, because it's probably also going to be a new type of hold for you. You might even be able to, if you're going light enough. Well, no, I won't say that because I'll probably get told I'm wrong. But yeah,
Are you going to say game the weight? What?
No, not game
In
the
the
weight,
distance.
but if you're going light enough, you might just have to bear hug like a med ball or something like that.
Yeah, that wouldn't be Zercher. So a few things. I'll kind of walk this workout out piece by piece. No pun intended. So 10 rounds. It's a Zercher walk with a barbell. Okay, let's start there. Zercher walks suck. Zercher anything sucks. So if you don't know what Zercher is, it's where you hold the barbell or the weight in the like crooks of your elbows when your arms are like bent up, and it's very uncomfortable. It's incredibly uncomfortable, like just from a painful standpoint. Like it hurts like the elbows and the joints a little bit. And so I will say that this is not like the Iron Mile where I want that discomfort. You can use something like if you want to pad the bar for the Zercher walks, you can, because we're using the Zercher walk kind of outside of the context in which the movement was created. It wasn't meant for these long duration walks. And so you can put like a towel wrapped around the barbell, and then you could like duct tape the towel, right? So you have like a pad. Just make sure it's not like a nice towel. Don't piss off your significant other. That's a tip for me.
Yeah.
So you can pad the bar, and then it's 10 rounds for max distance each round, and the weight is 50 to 60% of your body weight is what we said. Joe mentioned going down, and yes and no. So if you go too light, those walks are going to be long, like very long. And the reason I put the weight as heavy as I did is because the first time I did this workout, I was able to just do it in my backyard because the weight felt so heavy. I couldn't actually walk a terribly far distance. Like it was relatively short. And so I would walk, you know, back and forth in my backyard. And then I was just able to do the planks right then and there. If you do go too light, like you're just doing the barbell, which I'm not going to hate on. If you want to go light, go light. But if you end up walking like a half mile, this workout's going to turn into something no one intended it to be. Okay. That this really, really long, like, oh, I walked 7 miles and walk the plank. It's like that wasn't the intent. So pick a weight, maybe even adjust during. If you like start lighter, and if you're like, that's too light, you can add a little bit of weight. But this is not one like not like the Iron Mile where you should like walk away from your house and like not like I would try and stick within my zone, right? Like down the driveway, back up, or down back and forth on your street, something like that. Just so you can make adjustments as needed. Then rest between rounds 2 minutes, rest in the plank position. The goal would be 2 minutes straight plank. And then if not, then accumulate 2 minutes in the plank position to Joe's point. And this one is like all core, and try to make it your core. A lot of isometric contractions in this, a lot of fighting on your end to keep your core tight and engaged and not get sloppy. So make sure that you do that. But that's basically it. Walk through this one very carefully, make adjustments, and try not to walk, like I said, 7 miles. It's not what we want.
And like ultimate level up for this one, and I just thought of it like it's kind of like a old thing that we used to reference more of, but use a slush pipe. I remember we used one of
Yeah,
those. It made me think of as you were talking about how walking around. And I remember when, like, I don't know, 5 houses ago for you, we used your slosh pipe around your neighborhood. That was rough.
I need to get a new one. I
I
got
never
rid
had one. I've always wanted one, but I think I need to have at least somebody make me one because I'm not a very handy person.
You know what's funny? I know exactly where my slosh pipe is. So when we lived in a house in Texas, we moved to North Carolina and we rented that house out. And it was in the attic, and I was like, I'm leaving it there because this is a giant slosh pipe. It was like I don't remember how long it was. It's like 12 or 15 feet long. So it's
There's
just
still
like a
pictures of you online holding it.
yeah. If you just Google DIY slosh pipe like End of 3 Fitness, you would find it. But that slosh pipe is still, unless the tenant, because we still have it as a rental property, unless they threw it away, which I highly doubt they would do. Um, it's just chilling in that attic. I think if they move out, I'll probably just like go in and like grab it, and I don't need to, no need to build another one. I just have a slosh pipe ready. I almost forgot about slosh pipes. Thanks, Joe. I'm gonna
Yeah,
bring that back.
I know, right? Yeah, it won't take up much room. I might look into it a little bit more, but they're fun. They're intense. I mean, it could be a way to do something like this, and it wouldn't be as painful on the crooks of your arms, but it would be harder.
Oh yeah. And my favorite thing about the slosh pipe is it's kind of like Zone 2 Murph. Is like all it does is piss people off. Like that's my favorite thing about a slosh pipe. You can get somebody who's incredibly fit, run a 5-minute mile, or someone who can, deadlift 600 pounds. Doesn't matter. I hand you a slosh pipe, you all of a sudden suck at something, you start to get pissed off. And I've seen it over and over again because the thing doesn't weigh that much, but when the water starts sloshing all around, you can barely like manage it, and it's really. I know the first time I used it, I was pissed off, but I eventually
Yeah,
was able to calm down and embrace it for what it was.
it's like the slack line for me. I'm so bad at that.
All right. Well, I think we'll get out of here. Again, if you are wanting to get started with our training, because we're right at the beginning of a new cycle, go to garagegymathlete.com, sign up for a 14-day free trial. Try out the first 2 weeks of any track, shred track, hard to kill track, endure track, strength track, whatever you want. Try it out for 2 weeks, see what you think, and then make a decision if you want to continue. We'd love to have you around. For all of our athletes, been around for a long time. We really do appreciate you guys for sticking around, for listening to the podcast and all those things. You guys are awesome, and we really do appreciate it. But that's it for this podcast, guys. Remember, if you don't kill comfort, comfort will kill you. Gym Athlete Podcast. If you want to learn more, go to garagegymathlete.com. You can learn about our training. Let us send you a copy of our book, The Garage Gym Athlete, or you can even get featured on the Garage Gym Athlete podcast. Thanks for listening.